Morgan Freeman had done thousands of interviews in his lifetime. He was no stranger to tough questions, invasive reporters, or even outright disrespectful hosts. But something about this particular interview felt different. As he adjusted his suit and sat in the studio chair, the energy in the room was off. The lights beamed down intensely, the cameras locked onto him, and the studio audience murmured in anticipation. Across from him sat a young, ambitious talk show host, Emma Carter. She was known for her sharp wit, her unfiltered opinions, and her willingness to push boundaries, sometimes too far. She had built a career on calling out celebrities, catching them off guard, and putting them in uncomfortable situations just to get a viral moment. Tonight, it was clear that Morgan Freeman was her next target. "Mr. Freeman," she started with an overly confident smirk, "you've been in Hollywood for decades. You've played wise men, leaders, and even God himself. But let's be honest, do you ever feel like you're just coasting on that deep voice of yours?" The audience chuckled, but Morgan remained composed. His face, as always, was unreadable. He knew the game. Emma was testing him, trying to poke and prod until she got a reaction. He simply tilted his head slightly and replied in his slow, measured tone, "Interesting question. But tell me, do you think wisdom comes from a deep voice or from experience?" Emma hesitated for half a second, caught off guard by the counter-question. She recovered quickly, flipping through her notes, searching for her next move. Morgan leaned back, his fingers gently tapping the armrest of his chair. He wasn't going to fall into her trap. He had been through worse than this. The audience sensed the tension building. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was about to turn into something far more revealing. And as Emma geared up for her next question, she had no idea that Morgan Freeman was about to take complete control of the conversation in a way she'd never expected. Emma Carter straightened her posture, her confidence undeterred. She wasn't used to guests flipping the conversation on her like that, and for a moment, she hesitated. But she was determined. If she could make a name for herself by rattling one of Hollywood's most respected actors, it would be a career-defining moment. She glanced at her notes and then back at Morgan. "Come on, Mr. Freeman. You can't deny that people love you because of how you speak just as much as what you say. Some might argue that your entire career is built on that voice." A few gasps rippled through the audience. Some nodded, waiting to see how Morgan would respond, while others cringed, knowing this was a dangerous road to take. Morgan, however, remained calm. He exhaled softly, his fingers still tapping rhythmically on the chair's armrest. Then, he smiled a subtle but knowing smile. "You know," he said, his voice deep and steady, "I find it fascinating when people reduce a lifetime of hard work down to a single trait. You think my voice made my career? That's like saying a great painter is only great because they have a good brush." The audience loved that response. Laughter and applause filled the room, and for the first time, Emma's confidence wavered. But she wasn't ready to back down yet. "I mean, no disrespect," she quickly interjected, raising a hand to quiet the audience. "I'm just saying, there are people who work just as hard as you, maybe even harder, and they never achieve the kind of success you have. Do you think luck played a role?" Morgan leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. The room fell silent. "Luck?" He repeated, his voice a touch firmer now. "You know, I once worked as a janitor. I used to mop floors, scrub toilets. I took acting classes at night, auditioned during the day, and faced more rejections than I can count. If that's what you call luck, then maybe we need to redefine the word." The tension in the room was thick. Emma opened her mouth to respond, but something about the way Morgan looked at her made her stop. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she was in control of the conversation anymore. The audience sat on the edge of their seats, waiting for what would come next. Because it was clear now Morgan Freeman wasn't just here to answer questions. He was here to teach a lesson. Emma Carter felt the shift in the atmosphere. The audience, once merely spectators, now hung on to every word Morgan Freeman spoke. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a lesson in resilience, wisdom, and self-respect. And she was quickly realizing that she had walked straight into it. Still, her pride wouldn't let her back down. She shifted in her seat, feigning a casual chuckle. "All right, Mr. Freeman, I hear you," she said, flipping through her notes in an attempt to regain control. "But let's be honest, Hollywood isn't exactly fair, is it? You had talent, yes, but connections matter too. Do you really believe you got here on hard work alone?" A murmur ran through the audience. They knew what she was doing, trying to corner him, force him into admitting something that could create a headline. But Morgan, he wasn't having it. He took a deep breath, then looked directly at Emma. "Do you know how many years I worked before my first real role?" he asked. His voice was calm, but there was weight behind his words. Emma hesitated, unsure whether to answer. 50 years old, Morgan continued. "I was 50 when I got my first big break. Before that, I was doing bit parts, extra work, commercials, just trying to get by. I watched younger men come and go. I saw actors with connections flame out in 5 years while I was still mopping floors and rehearsing lines in front of a bathroom mirror." The audience was silent, absorbing every word. Emma blinked, momentarily thrown off. "You see," Morgan went on, his deep, steady voice cutting through the tension, "success isn't about who you know. It's about who you become. And if you're not willing to do the work, to suffer through the rejections, to keep going when the world tells you no over and over again, then no connection in the world will save you." The room erupted in applause. Even Emma, despite herself, was nodding. But Morgan wasn't done. He leaned back slightly, letting the weight of his words settle before delivering his final blow. "And you want to talk about fairness?" he continued, a hint of a smile on his face. "Life isn't fair. Not Hollywood. Not anywhere. But fairness has never been a requirement for greatness. Work ethic, persistence, self-respect. Those are the things that separate the ones who last from the ones who don't." The crowd exploded again. Some people stood up, clapping. Emma, for the first time, felt like a student rather than the interviewer. Morgan simply smiled, folded his hands in his lap, and waited. The game had changed. And Emma Carter knew it. Emma Carter had walked into this interview thinking she was in control. She had built a career on pressing her guests, pushing them to say something controversial, something she could twist into a viral moment. But now, as she sat across from Morgan Freeman, she realized she had underestimated him badly. The audience was no longer watching a talk show. They were witnessing something far more profound. Morgan had stripped away the pretenses, revealing a raw truth that was impossible to ignore. His words didn't just resonate. They landed with the kind of weight that made people sit back and reflect. Emma cleared her throat, trying to regain her composure. She needed to turn this around, to shift the momentum back in her favor. "That's an inspiring story, Morgan," she said, forcing a smile. "But let's be honest, don't you think that in today's world, people expect a little more transparency from celebrities? People want to know the real story, the struggles, the scandals. Don't you think that's part of being in the public eye?" Morgan raised an eyebrow, a small smirk forming on his lips. He could see right through her. "You think people want transparency?" he repeated, his voice steady. "Or do they just want a spectacle?" The room went still. The way he said it, calm, deliberate, made it clear that this wasn't just an answer. It was a statement. Emma shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the media." Morgan held up a hand, silencing her. Not forcefully, not rudely, just with the quiet authority of a man who had seen it all. "The media," he said, "is not the voice of the people. It's the voice of those who control the narrative and the truth. The real truth is rarely entertaining enough for ratings, is it? A murmur spread through the audience. People were nodding. They felt what he was saying. Emma opened her mouth to respond, but for the first time in her career, she had nothing to say. Morgan leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "You see, Emma," he continued, "I have nothing to prove. My work speaks for itself. My life speaks for itself. I don't need to sensationalize my story to stay relevant." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he delivered the final blow. "The real problem," he said, "isn't that the world wants transparency. It's that it has forgotten the difference between truth and entertainment." Silence. Emma sat frozen, her carefully constructed persona crumbling in real time. She had come into this interview expecting to expose Morgan Freeman. Instead, she had been exposed. The audience erupted into applause, not the kind that comes from excitement, but the kind that comes from understanding. They weren't just clapping for Morgan Freeman. They were clapping for the truth he had just laid bare. Emma, realizing she had nowhere left to go, forced a tight-lipped smile. "Well," she said, barely masking her defeat, "I think that's a perfect place to take a break." Morgan just nodded, sitting back, completely at ease. He had one, and he hadn't even needed to raise his voice. The show cut to a commercial break, but the energy in the studio remained electric. The audience wasn't just watching another celebrity interview. They had witnessed something real, something raw. As the cameras powered down for the moment, Emma Carter leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. She had underestimated Morgan Freeman, and now she was paying the price. Backstage, the producers were scrambling. They had expected a lighthearted segment, maybe a few controversial sound bites, but instead, they had something entirely different. The control room was buzzing. "Did you hear that last line? This is going to explode online," one producer muttered, already clipping the segment for social media. Emma, trying to shake off her embarrassment, leaned toward Morgan and spoke in a hushed voice, her microphone temporarily muted. "I wasn't trying to offend you, you know," she said, forcing a chuckle. Morgan simply smiled. "I know," he said smoothly. "But you should ask yourself why you thought you could." Her face fell slightly. There was no malice in his voice, no anger, just wisdom. The kind of wisdom that cut deeper than any insult ever could. The cameras flickered back on. "We're back with the legendary Morgan Freeman," Emma said, pasting on her best TV smile. She was trying to move forward, but the damage had already been done. The final minutes of the interview were polite, professional, but the spark was gone. Emma had lost the upper hand, and she knew it. So did the audience. So did everyone watching at home. Within hours of airing, the interview was everywhere. Clips flooded social media, each one racking up millions of views. But one moment stood out more than the rest the second. Morgan had silenced the entire room with his statement about truth versus entertainment. The real problem isn't that the world wants transparency. It's that it has forgotten the difference between truth and entertainment. People couldn't stop talking about it. News outlets picked it up, podcasters analyzed it, and even celebrities weighed in. Morgan Freeman just schooled the entire media industry in under 30 seconds, one headline read. Meanwhile, Emma Carter's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Some defended her, saying she was just doing her job. Others weren't so forgiving. "She walked into a game of chess with a grandmaster," one commenter joked. "And she was playing checkers." Morgan, however, remained silent. He didn't respond to the frenzy, didn't tweet, didn't give another interview about it. He had already said everything he needed to say. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful part of all. The interview had barely finished airing when the internet caught fire. Within minutes, clips of Morgan Freeman's calm yet devastating response flooded social media. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, every platform was buzzing. Morgan Freeman just humbled an entire generation of TV hosts in under 30 seconds. This is how you handle a disrespectful interviewer with class, wisdom, and the truth. She tried to play games, but Morgan was playing chess the whole time. Hashtags like hashtag Morgan Freeman shuts down, hashtag Truth vs Entertainment, and hashtag Stay Classy Morgan trended at lightning speed. Some users compared it to other iconic celebrity interviews, wherein a lister had flipped the script on an overconfident host. But this felt different. It wasn't just about shutting someone down, it was about exposing a larger truth. TV networks wasted no time capitalizing on the moment. Some news outlets tried to paint it as a simple heated debate between an experienced actor and a young, ambitious journalist. Others took a more aggressive stance, claiming Emma Carter was a victim of unfair backlash from online critics. But the problem was the clip spoke for itself. Emma's facial expressions, the awkward silences, the audience's reaction, it all told the real story. No amount of damage control could erase what had already unfolded in front of millions. Her show's official account posted a carefully crafted statement. Our recent interview with Morgan Freeman sparked an engaging discussion about fame, success, and the role of media in storytelling. We appreciate the dialogue and respect all perspectives shared during the conversation. But the comments underneath told a different story. Engaging discussion? More like a masterclass from Morgan on how to handle nonsense. She tried to trap him, and instead, she walked into her own downfall. Emma should take notes instead of trying to spin this. While social media was celebrating Morgan Freeman's poise and wisdom, behind the scenes, Emma Carter was dealing with the fallout. Her producers weren't happy. The segment had backfired spectacularly. Instead of getting a viral moment that made her look sharp and fearless, she had become the story for all the wrong reasons. You put yourself in that position, one producer reportedly told her behind closed doors. You underestimated him. And now we're in damage control mode. Emma was fuming. She had built her brand on being tough, on pushing guests to uncomfortable places. But this time, she had pushed too far and she had picked the wrong opponent. Her team scrambled to control the narrative, booking her for upcoming media appearances where she could explain herself, maybe even make it look like Morgan had taken her words the wrong way. But the problem was, Morgan Freeman didn't need to explain himself. The more Emma tried to justify the interview, the worse it looked. And Morgan? He just sat back and let the world do the talking for him. As the media frenzy grew, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about a talk show host getting outmatched. This was about respect, wisdom, and the power of silence, and Morgan Freeman had just delivered a lesson the world wouldn't soon forget. While Morgan Freeman stayed silent, the world kept talking. The viral moment had taken on a life of its own, spreading beyond social media into mainstream news, podcasts, and late-night talk shows. Emma Carter found herself at the center of it all, but not in the way she had hoped. Her name trended alongside Morgan's, but for all the wrong reasons. Memes flooded the internet, showing her stunned reaction next to captions like, "When you try to challenge Morgan Freeman and realize he's 3 steps ahead." She asked for transparency, and he gave her a reality check. Morgan Freeman, 1. Emma Carter, 0. Even celebrities weighed in. A-list actors, fellow journalists, and public figures praised Morgan's wisdom and poise. One well-known comedian joked, "Morgan Freeman just taught a masterclass in shutting someone down without even raising his voice, and we all got to watch it for free." Meanwhile, Emma was struggling. Inside the network, executives were in full damage control mode. Ratings for Emma's show had been strong before the interview, but after, the backlash was impossible to ignore. Viewers who had once enjoyed her sharp interviewing style were turning against her. The show's comment sections were filled with criticism. "Used to love this show, but Emma's arrogance is unbearable. She got humbled by Morgan Freeman, and now she's playing the victim?" This is why people don't trust the media. She tried to bait him and failed miserably. Advertisers were starting to get nervous. Some even pulled their sponsorships, not wanting their brands associated with the controversy. Emma tried to fight back. She did an interview of her own, claiming the internet had taken things out of context, and that she had simply been asking Morgan the tough questions people wanted answers to. But it only made things worse. One journalist fired back, saying, "No, Emma, you weren't asking tough questions. You were being disrespectful, and you got called out for it." The show's network execs had a serious meeting behind closed doors. Could Emma recover from this? Or was it time to pull the plug? While all this unfolded, Morgan Freeman remained completely silent. No interviews, no public statements, no social media posts. But then, after days of speculation, he finally made a brief comment during a casual encounter with a journalist at a charity event. When asked about the viral interview, he simply smiled and said, "I don't argue. I just speak the truth. It's up to people whether they listen or not." That one sentence sent the internet into another frenzy. Morgan had once again dominated the conversation without even trying. Meanwhile, Emma Carter's future was hanging by a thread, and the network was about to make a huge decision. The fallout from the interview had been relentless. Emma Carter's reputation was in freefall, her show losing viewers by the day. The network, desperate to stop the bleeding, made a brutal decision Emma would be taking a break from the show indefinitely. Meanwhile, Morgan Freeman? Unbothered. When asked about Emma's fate, he simply gave a small smile and said, "The truth doesn't need defending. It stands on its own." And with that, the world moved on, but the lesson he taught that day? It would never be forgotten.